Hi, Mr. Luddy.
How are you?
Max, how are you?
Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you. George.
George, pleasure. If you don't have a good character, it's better that you not be educated. And we need to act like human beings should act, like civilized human beings, to get the best possible outcome. Now, within that, we can have disagreements, but they should be civil. We tend to be rule breakers when the rule doesn't make sense.
You have a dress code. Why do you think it's so important, and what is the reason of it?
When the government controls the curriculum, the mob is controlling the curriculum. It's not, and the government is the mob.
Smart people like you, Walter Block, have you ever thought getting into politics to sell this idea of real life?
If you don't respect time to teach, like things will happen even within our school that I don't even know about. So one of the things they did is they said, well, we have birthday parties once a month for all the kids that had a birthday. Okay. Well, then it turns into be a class. And then it turns into bringing in a lot of sweet stuff, which I forbade in the schools. Even they'll say, I wanted to bring a box of donuts to the teacher. Well, not in this school, you don't do it, okay? Because little kids got to carry the donuts to the teacher. What's the lesson he's learning? Not the lesson we want to teach. Anyhow, so we abolished it again and said, we've told you cannot do this, and we're going to inspect, and you can't do it. So then they said, well, the kids who came before got this nice party and sweet stuff, and now you're saying the future kids won't get it. It's not fair. I said, get used to life. It's not fair. It changes all the time. Kids will be fine. You adults will have a problem, but the kids will be fine. And it didn't turn out to be a big issue.
Can we start?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Luddy, thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank you, our friend, previous guest, Walter Block, Walter Block, for introduction.
A great economist. And
Great
a very
economist,
good man.
and we had very good, very interesting conversation with him. And I came up your lecture on YouTube on Henry Hazlitt, and that's when I asked him if we could sit with you, and you provided more than podcast. We did great tour of your two schools. Before we get into that, first I want to tell our viewers that today our guest is founder and CEO of CaptiveAire Systems and founder of Thales Academy. We have lots of questions, but after these tours we have even more questions. So welcome to the show. George.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad I'm here. Thank you for your time. And let's start. Like, this goes to people, our viewers are from country of Georgia. It's gonna be translated to Georgian language. And briefly tell us about yourself and your academy.
Okay, so I grew up in Pennsylvania, a large family, 8 children. We all went to Catholic school, which were highly disciplined and very good schools. And most all of us went to college. My father was an intellectual. My mother was very, very smart, but also very aesthetic. She was a dressmaker, and she had overwhelming amount of common sense and optimism in life. So we were very lucky to have those parents to mentor us in life. After college, I was drafted into the Army, served a year in Vietnam, and then I worked in Los Angeles for 5 years and decided I had this calling to move to Raleigh, North Carolina. And where did that come from? Well, I spent a little bit of time in North Carolina in the military, But I did know that North Carolina is one of the best states in the U.S. in terms of the people. They're friendly, they're constructive. And North Carolina has traditionally been the best economic state in the South and has been since about 1900. So I thought it was a good choice, but I didn't know anybody, didn't have a job. And I was very fortunate to get into the restaurant fire suppression business, which eventually allowed me to start CaptiveAire and become a fairly large company and a dominant company in commercial kitchen ventilation and now HVAC. Along the way, I made these observations that too many students don't have a fair opportunity in life because they didn't have the same education and parents that I had. And as being an entrepreneur, we want to take action, we don't want to talk about it. And that's what eventually led to the creation of the schools, to create opportunities, to use the resources we have to help as many students as we can. And then secondarily, and this is what we're talking about today, to have copycat spin-offs and have people adopt whatever we do in any way that's appropriate, that they can help other children. And we're starting to see more evidence of that around the U.S.
You kind of already answered my next question, which would be to take us back to why did you, you as a businessman, decide to have your say in education ventures? You already said that, but I told you we are in the process of something similar in country Georgia. Tell us what difficulties, what can we expect? Anything from your first day's experience? How did you start? And what visions you had, scalability? And I tried to look up some. I know you started from small, so if you can tell us more on that.
I was very confident that in day one we could outperform traditional schools. And the way we would do it is basically what I learned in school and the traditions of 200 years of schooling in the United States. So good discipline, good quality teachers, teachers who have good discipline but also love the kids and really want to see those children learn and are willing to extend themselves to the maximum capabilities, and then provide them with good curriculum instructions and books. So on day one of Franklin Academy, which would have been July of 1998, the local schools had a hard time to have all the books when they started. I piled up all the books, they were about this high, and then I piled on top of that all of the materials that traditionally parents would buy. And so the parents came in and said, well, I don't think you understand, we're supposed to buy these things. And I said, I understand that. I'm making a point here. We're ready to teach your children. Now, think about the students and parents that come in day one. They're taking a risk. So you're getting a slightly different quality of individual. They're willing to take a risk to improve their life of their children. That gives you a good starting point. Now, some of those people in their mind think they're going to run the school. So that's an obstacle you'll have to overcome. It's good for anybody to provide advice, comments, recommendations, but someone has to run the school. And there's a lot of things that might be nice that you could do, but the primary mission is to teach these children starting in K-5, reading, math, phonics, good disciplines, memorization, and we're even now bringing in natural order, natural law, physics, economics, really good writing skills, basic things. How do you hold your pencil correctly or your pen? There's a thing called the Palmer method, which my dad taught me. It's 1873. You're writing with your arm, not this hand stuff. So if they learn these basic skills, then by the time they're in the 6th grade, they've developed all these basic skills. They're good spellers, they're good readers, they remember what they read, they can discuss what they read, and they can write about what they read. Now they're ready for higher order classical education. And the classical education really is gaining the benefits of 2,500 years of the best thinkers that ever existed in the world, from Aristotle to Aquinas, the great scientists over a period of years. It's a really beautiful thing. But somehow it was pushed out even in the US, even in Catholic schools that essentially were the creators of classic education.
I would like to talk about more deeply about this, because on the Thales Academy website, which is great, I just was looking at a lot of information there for like most questions you have, you can find answers there. It's really good website. But I see, and it was like really interesting for me, you have here 4 course strengths, and these 4 are like more a philosophical approach. Like first is natural order, human dignity, moral philosophy, and our intellectual inheritance. So can you like tell us more about this, like philosophical view? Like I know, I understand like kids, you educate like to know math, physics, like these technicals. But besides this, we need citizens with a good moral, right, and good ethics. So how big is this part to your academy?
Well, think about this. Prior to math and science and physics, etc., is character formation. And if you don't have a good character, it's better that you not be educated. And I'm taking that from,
because
from Bishop Sheen, made that statement, 50 years ago. So people tend to fail on character more so than on competence. They do fail on competence, but most people fail on character. So we emphasize from a very young age virtue, civility, caring about other people. There's kind of a German philosophy called personalism. Do you understand the other person, and do you care about them? And if you think about a company or a school, we need to care about the teachers, the leaders, the students, the parents. We need to understand them. And we need to act like human beings should act, like civilized human beings, to get the best possible outcome. Now, within that, we can have disagreements, but they should be civil. Oddly, UNC just opened a school to teach students how to be civil when they have disagreements. We should learn that in kindergarten. Because if you look at all the great technology companies, they fought out tremendously what would be the next technology, what would be our approach. But they did it in a basic civil way, and they got really great outcomes. So this whole idea of character development is a prerequisite to learning, and if you can't get through that prerequisite, then we don't want to teach you, because you're going to be a dangerous person.
And following this, you have, which I really like it, 3 pages, logical thing. On the website is saying your major mission is to make people start thinking, kids to study how to think. That's the most important. And here is three phases: a grammar phase, logic phase, and rhetoric phase, which was like when I read it was wow, it's a great, like you see like formula how kids to start thinking. Common sense comes from this. So
If you think about most educational schools, it's all process. And we move toward outcomes. And we list 15 outcomes. They begin with integrity. If you don't have integrity, you don't have anything. My mentor, Dr. Bill Peterson, who was an Austrian economist, both a student and colleague of Mises, described schools that the purpose of school is to learn how to think and learn how to think morally and correctly. And if the Austrian economists talk about alertness, paying attention as a prerequisite to thinking. So we have to be taking in knowledge and making observations. Then we think, and then we act. And all of it has to be in the context of personalism, emotional intelligence. We're dealing with human beings. And that can be overlooked with spreadsheets and computers, et cetera, emails. So if we develop somebody along the classics, they're learning the basis of human nature, which did not change in the last 2,500 years and never will. They're learning how to correctly deal with people in a moral way, with integrity and with personalism and human dignity. And human dignity covers this whole range. I like to think in terms of, if you're not a decent person, everything else you're doing is a complete waste of time. So that has to be the first question we ask ourselves every day. Am I acting as a decent human being? That's the first order of business.
And then we start.
And then we start to take care of whatever
Right.
our assignment is for the day. And you're not going to hear that very often in conventional schools. You're going to hear the math, the science, etc. But there has to be context to it. You know, recently heard these CEOs of these major colleges says everything is in context. Well, their context is completely wrong. And that's why they got the wrong answers. And it didn't turn out good for anybody.
One of the interviews on YouTube, there are a lot of Robert Luddy lectures and information. What stayed in my mind was you mentioned about mini lessons, which impressed me. You were talking about every day, 2 minutes, just anything, information giving to kids. Can you tell us more about that and for our viewers? And is there anything else we may have missed today which makes Thales Academy different? You can mention something like mini lessons, which is this is done here and it's not done anywhere like any other private schools.
You know, you think about mini lessons. So my mother told us continuously, if you're not doing it today, you're never going to do it. So she developed a mentality in us with that one simple sentence. We do things immediate. So if you look at CaptiveAire, we operate in real time. We don't have lists of project lists. Now, we would have lists of major things we want to do, but any problems of the day, anything that can be settled today will be settled today before the close of business. That came from a mini lesson from my mother. And she taught us many of those mini lessons. For example, we would come up with an idea and say, hey, Mom, we want to do thus and such. And she would say, okay, that's fine, you can do that. The family doesn't, do it now. And the family doesn't have any resources, so you figure out how to do it. And I'll give you one last one. She would say all problems are solvable. And then she would say, it's your job to figure out the solution. Thank you, Mother. So she taught us to be resourceful, to do it now. She taught us about human dignity all through these little mini lessons, which were repeated often. So if you think about it, if we have mini lessons, and we're going to do a better job in the future than we currently do, we're going to somewhat formalize it. So you hear something in the 2nd grade, in the 5th, in the 7th, and the 9th, pretty soon, like my mother, it's ingrained in your thinking. You're never going to forget it. One of the attributes about direct instruction is you learn to mastery and you learn permanently. That's what a mini lesson is. You never forget it. There's many things in our life that had a profound impact in a very short period of time we will never forget, and they inform our judgment in the future. So as teachers, we have to constantly make sure that we are advising the students how important these things are, and they're energizing. Do it today means that, we have companies who work where they write a project down, they actually never get it done. In CaptiveAire, if you give us an idea, we're on it right now. We're sending emails, we're calling people, because we're excited about the opportunity that we can improve what we're doing. And that excitement is important.
And the lesson from there would be, there is no excuse. Don't look for excuses.
No excuses.
Just do it.
Mary Barra from GM, she's the CEO, had a really good comment. And she said the best time to solve a problem is when it's presented to you. Really simple. Let's get on it. Let's move on it here. And that mentality makes you very productive, and it builds momentum. So we either have inertia or momentum. And momentum's hard to maintain unless you maintain it. And if you move toward inertia, it's very hard to get back to momentum. It takes a lot of energy to get back there. So it's better to try to live in the world of momentum, continuous flow, etc. That's the way our plants operate, that's the way schools operate. And people actually love that environment, those who adapt to it. Now, some people won't adapt to it, but those who adapt, they absolutely love the environment.
We mentioned we went this morning with Academy, and we saw inside classes and kids and teachers. I want to say my experience. I graduated from Soviet school, and I was not happy when I needed to go to school. Like I was not, I wanted to be a lot of vacation time than study time. The kids there, when we saw this morning, and the teachers, they told me they are happy to come to school. So
That's true.
they want to go to school, like opposite of my experience. I don't want it to go to school because it was too much stress for little kids to go to school. Here, they are happy to go to school. So what do you think what makes them happy to come to your school?
The highest quality of the teacher, in my mind, is one that piques the interest of the student in what they're teaching. And the only way that's going to happen if the teacher has tremendous enthusiasm for whatever they're teaching. So I'll give you a specific example. We have an interview with Tony Esselin, who's a professor at Thales College. And he's talking about a Shakespeare play in Vienna. Well, if someone gave me a piece of paper and said, do you want to read this play in Shakespeare in Vienna? I'd say, no, I don't think so. But if you listen to this interview, I was just going to listen to a little bit because it runs about an hour. He's the master classic teacher. I listened to the whole thing and I actually got my head into it, and I thought, this is tremendous. Well, I wouldn't have done that had it not been for Tony Esselin.
Right.
So to me, that's the quality that we want to develop. Now, Tony Esselin's one of the top 100 classical teachers in the US, so he's the most superior teacher you're going to get. And most people can't be as good as him, but they can work toward that approach. So I think anytime you're dealing with anybody that has a lot of enthusiasm for what they're doing, it tends to pull you in. And that's the quality of that we have to continuously develop in our teachers. And if you watch 3 or 4 direct instruction teachers, they're all doing the exact same thing, but they're doing it slightly differently. They're bringing their own personal emotion. They're bringing their humanity into it. And it all looks a little bit different, even though it's the same thing. The kids love it. I had an occasion where I ran into some young girls out at the airport, and I said, oh, I see we're on break and you're going somewhere. I bet you're happy to be out of school. And they said, no, we're not happy to be out of school. We love school. And I was perplexed, because usually you don't hear that comment, but I've heard that very consistently, and you've heard it already today.
For the conclusion, you say the reason of this is a teacher.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My mentor, Dr. Bill Peterson, it was more important to him that I learned Austrian economics than it was to me, at least initially. But then I realized he's intent on teaching me. This is a great gift. And he taught me, as an adult, a good amount of Austrian economics. And now I just love the subject, but he made that happen. I can't even take much credit for it.
Speaking of teachers, that brings us to my next question. I want to pick up your brain on your experience and how you deal with selective process of teachers. And in modern world, it's important to catch up with modern technology. Let's say last year when we did Walter Block's podcast, I had to overnight work a couple days to translate. Right now AI can do it. Soon our podcast will be done, translated with my voice in Georgian.
Amazing.
And I don't have to spend
Incredible.
time. So technology goes that fast, and a teacher you selected for your school 5 years ago now has to catch up with technology too, advances. So how do you deal with, first tell us anything about selective process. What are you looking in teachers when you interview them? I see you have a lot of vacancies, like if someone wants to work. So tell us about that.
I think it's the same process at CaptiveAire, in that every person in a working environment has to be willing to personally grow over time. And if they're not willing to do that, they're becoming obsolete. They're obsoleting themselves. So we try to make it clear, we will help you in every way possible, but you can't be static. And particularly in education, there's a lot of static. People, even in engineering, people use 20-year-old documents. In education, they do the same thing. So we try to select teachers based on their understanding of classic curriculum, or in the case of K-5, their willingness to teach direct instruction, to learn it well and teach it to the best of their ability. And that ability has to continue to grow. So it might take in the K-5 3 years to reach a high level, but then there's always a higher level you can go to, which we coach them, we provide resources to get there. In terms of teaching ability, we just recently did a conference on classic curriculum, and there were 3 professors from around the country. They all had tremendous ideas on what should be done. Here's one of them. The professor said, for every new book you read, you must read an old book. Simple, right? There's one of the short lessons, mini lessons. Well, that just really stuck in my head. And then another professor made the comment that 80% of the people after formal education never read another book. Pretty shocking. You could argue about the percentage.
Didn't mention accreditation.
So everybody within our organization has to be willing to grow and to change. And it's back to this constructo law that the world is dynamic, it's changing, it's moving, and the key point is trying to move toward more efficiency. So think about today, we're busier than we've ever been, but we're also much more productive. Okay, highly productive. So the technology didn't solve our business time, but it did allow us to deploy our time more efficiently and to have much higher output. And we live, at a very high standard of living because of it. But we wouldn't be there if we had static thinking.
What's your take on classroom size? Like, how many is the...
Classroom size is a real joke to me, and the reason is I went to high school with 50 kids in a class. And there was no discipline problems, so it was not a problem. It may have been a problem for the teacher, and it's a heavy workload. If you look at classic or direct instruction, we do ability grouping. And if you start a new school in first grade, you might have 6 reading levels. We have 6 different classrooms. So every student is in a classroom where they can learn, and those adjustments are made every couple of months. So if you need to move up, you stay the same, or you move down. When you have ability group, you could have 50 kids in the classroom. In direct instruction, it would make no difference, assuming discipline and assuming the students paid attention. So one of the hard rules in direct instruction, all students at all times pay attention. If a student will not pay attention, they're sent to the office. And so students are very acclimated to this, and they have all these commands, the ready command, your feet are on the floor, your hands are on the table, you're ready to learn. And they'll say, page 42, point and look. So the students know the commands, so everything is very simplified. When you get into classic curriculum and you want to do Socratic, class size can be more challenging. So if you have 25 students, maybe you would break it into 2 or 3 groups for Socratic discussion. Because if you have 25, there's going to be students left behind. But in general, class sizes can be large, and they have to be large to have economic efficiency. But it can only work under good rules of discipline and a correct understanding of what's the current class size, what's right for this particular function.
So there is no definitive, like it cannot be more than 10?
Absolutely not. For example, in management, they say you can't manage over 5 or 7 people. I had 80 sales divisions report directly to me, and I'm running a company. And it went on for 30, 40 years. So all these rules people make up never made any sense to me. So we go back to common sense. Who made up this rule? Nobody could even tell you. So we tend to be rule breakers when the rule doesn't make sense.
You have a dress code on your school, so why do you think it's so important, and what is reason of it?
A dress code is a very light touch, if you think about it, and it's very simple. So if you have the most modern fancy clothes and I have not so great clothes, it creates a hierarchy that doesn't really need to exist. It creates a lot of chatter that doesn't need to exist. So it does a couple things. It says we're all students, we're all equal in the school, we all dress alike. And for the parents, it's very simple. My 8-year-old grandsons, they know what to put on for the day. Mom doesn't have to tell them. They do go into the drawer, they'll know exactly what to do. It's very simple. And then dress becomes a non-issue. We specified, you can't wear designer stuff. So you could have the right shirt, but it's a designer shirt, you can't wear it. Because it's gonna undermine the whole intent and purpose. So the dress code simplifies things, makes it easy on everybody, and it's inexpensive and good for the parents. At our Catholic school, we have an actual uniform, so it's more expensive. They really look great, but it's a lot more complicated and it's more expensive. And Thales is trying to serve large number of students, so you can have standards in a boutique school that you can't have universally.
I wanted to ask about tuition. It's pretty affordable, what I see. The tuition, it's for me. I can understand financially how it can work for the price.
Here's a simple formula. Teaching is the teacher, the student, and the parent. That's what education is. And they have to work together as a team. Everything else is secondary. So if you look at modern education, there's more individuals not teaching than teaching. That's a massive overhead on the classroom. So we have a building that's got, you were in those buildings, standard buildings, 550 students. You have a head of school, assistant head of school, and an administrator at the front desk. That's it. So it's a decentralized model. And then there's some secondary things we do in curriculum and construction, et cetera. But that basic model functions at a relatively low cost. And if you go into a school, and maybe you experience this today, it's very calm. It's not like a retail business where you've got people scurrying around. Everybody's in their place. It just works really, really well. And the teachers tend to know the names of all the students. They know the parents. It's a community. And I think it's one of the reasons where the kids, they have a lot of friends. They like the fact that they know the other teachers and they know the head of school. It's just a really, I've got 2 grandkids, one male, one female. So they went pre-K, K, and the transformation of those kids, I didn't even know if they could make it into pre-K, literally. They never had any problem. And you could see them, they're blossoming just almost overnight because they have these amazing teachers. And they want to be with that teacher because they're going to do things that they're learning. You know, when you're young, every new thing you learn is so exciting.
Good time with the teacher.
Yeah. So that's how we do it.
Yeah, great. The total surprise for this price, this quality of education, it's great. So you say you try to make as low as you can this administrative costs.
Yes. And that cost, we started at $5,000. That was 07. If you inflated that, it would be pushing toward 8,000, and we're still under 7,000. So we're lower than the CPI, and the CPI tends to understate inflation. And it was interesting. I went to our school in Knightdale some years ago, and the Chamber of Commerce was putting on some kind of event. Maybe they were at dinner or whatever it was. So we stood at the front door, and we greeted all the parents. And in almost all cases, there was 2 parents. They may have been married, not married, I don't know, but there was 2 people that came, a male and a female. And they would tell their stories. They were excited to have their kids in this private school, that their child, this is the American way, my child's going to advance further economically in life than I have. And I thought, they're making a sacrifice to be here. I'll give you one example. So this woman I know went home and told her husband, I want to put our daughter this next year into kindergarten, and it's going to cost $5,000. And he said, well, we have $5,000, but we agreed to buy a new car, and you've already agreed to that. So we can't put her in the school. And here's what the woman said to her husband. I understand what you say is correct. I'll get a job on the weekend and I'll pay for it. Well, guess who won the argument? and the young woman just blossomed in school. And ultimately the husband thought, well, yeah, that was the right answer. It's just such a beautiful experience for normal families that would not be able to go to a private school. And this idea of overcharging for anything, to me, is obnoxious to begin with. The nature of entrepreneurs is we give you something that's more attractive and we charge less money. That's the whole nature of entrepreneurship. We don't say, well, here's an attractive package. We're going to gouge as much money as we can get out of you. But that's what the private school is saying. We're going to charge you $30,000 a year, and Thales is going to charge you $7,000 a year. It's obnoxious. There's no reason for it. And kids don't need nursemates. They have nurses and counselors, and they have all these people in the schools. Kids learn to adapt. They adapt way better than their parents. And the adaptability is a huge part of life. This is what we're talking about this afternoon, continuously adapting to the future. But if you're used to being nursemaided, you don't adapt. You don't have a reason to.
You say I don't need nurses in my school. How government regulations and like how do you deal with government? Which could be different in Georgia from North Carolina.
In a private school, it's interesting, it's not in all states, but I would say 2/3 of the states, there's very little regulation on private schools. So for example, in North Carolina, you have to notify the Department of Administration that you're going to open a school. You have to comply with all North Carolina laws, and you're supposed to post normed scores, publicly post them. That's it. Nobody's going to come inspect you beyond the fire inspector and the building inspector. You're just in compliance with all laws, which everybody has to comply with laws anyhow. It's a very simple system, very little regulation.
They don't see your curriculums, like
No.
No?
Not in private school.
Wow, that's great. That's good.
Think about when the government controls the curriculum, the mob is controlling the curriculum. It's
Right.
The government is the mob. We want the best thinkers to control the curriculum. There's one sitting behind you in the area behind us today. That's what he does. Thales Press. He writes the curriculum.
So your business, CaptiveAire, it's not subsidizing your school, right?
It does, because it pays for all the buildings.
Okay.
It doesn't have to pay to run the school, but it pays for all the buildings, all the initial capital costs.
But school as a business itself.
Yes.
It makes a profit, school as a business, or?
No, it doesn't really make, but it cash flows. It can pay the bills, but it cannot pay the capital cost. If you look at public schools, they have a separate budget to pay for capital costs. So it's similar in that respect.
I think a very important thing is like how close are like studying program to the reality. When I was a kid and I was studying some subjects, I always had a question: why do I need to study this? When and where can I use this? Like some teaching, some formulas in algebra maybe. And as a kid, I have a question. Okay, I can maybe spend time and study, but what is the usage of it? Where can I use this on a real life? What gives me this Brazilian player? That's a famous story. He wrote a book about his experience, and a lot of people in Brazil, because of they wanted to read this book, they get studying reading and writing. So that was a motivation for them, big motivation to read this book, to get these people educated. So what do you think how important is for kids to they understand why they are studying this exact subject?
We've all asked that question in school: why am I studying this subject? Because particularly as Americans, we tend to be very practical. But if you use this context, we're trying to understand human nature. And in order to make good decisions, we need a depth and breadth of knowledge. So my father was a mathematician, my mother was a dress designer and painter. That's two entirely different things, but they both inform what we do. If we make a product, it's got to work mathematically, but it has to be beautiful also. Right. So if we skipped all the beauty, Apple would not exist. Apple exists because of aesthetics. also mathematics. As we learn more and we get the depth and breadth, for example, in the book I provided to you from Adrian Bijan, I was so excited I didn't study physics in college. I was so excited to be learning from him. And then I realized what he's teaching me impacts every single decision I make in life. So we have to be able to convey that to students. That sure, you're not going to be a physicist, but you have to understand how the world works. And the only way you're going to understand it is you're going to have to know something about the natural order, which is physics. Mathematics is going to build your logic skills, which most people have very weak logic skills. Finance is going to teach you how to manage money, which you're going to be engaged with your entire life. We have to explain that to students. If we just say, you have to take this course, that's not a rational answer. Right. And schools tend to do that. Well, you have to do this checkoff. I hate the idea of checkoffs.
Yeah, it's just preparing equipment for college.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you check this, you're good for college.
We're using this term, and it goes back to Ben Franklin. The best investment is to invest in yourself. So I actually gave a talk to some of the students a couple years ago on investing in yourself. It's a very powerful concept. So everything you learn will have a future value. So when I was 20 years old, all I could do was speculate how life would turn out. Now near 80, I know how it turned out. Viktor Frankl talks about that in his books, Man's Search for Meaning. We have to pass that wisdom along to students. What you're doing is you're preparing yourself for the unknown and the unknowable, and you don't know when it'll occur, and you don't know what the challenge will be. And I've told this to my wife, and she almost didn't believe me. I said, in any given day, I have just enough skills to get through the day. She's saying, well, you've been around, you've done this thing for 50 years. It must be easy for you. And I said, no, because the challenges are new. They're more complex. So students, even after they're out of formal education, they continue to prepare themselves for that time in the future when they need. Think of the leaders we have around the world. The challenges are formidable. Most of them are not as prepared as they need to be. But the more well prepared they are, the better the outcomes. And that's what we have to get across to students.
Do you provide lectures for Thales Academy students occasionally? Like, do you teach sometimes?
Sometimes, not as often as I should. I'm going to start doing more of it. And I do this for the college students. I give them a 20-minute lecture, and then we talk about it. I'm going to do one on technology, 40-year-old book on technology, and I'm going to show how that relates to, here's all the things I pulled out of that book that relate to right this point in time. Whereas if you handed somebody a 40-year-old book, they would say, well, that company went out of business. Why do I even want to read this book? So everything we read and learn is making us stronger, deeper intellectual content, better decision maker. And even if it just affirms what we already knew, that's a good thing. We need constant affirmation because we should be retesting everything we do to say, is this the best approach? One of the things that we're going through this week, what may have been a good decision 5 years ago that continued for 5 years may not be a good decision today because of Adrian Bijan's dynamics of the world. A lot of things have changed in that 5-year period. We need to relook at it.
We have a new president, Trump, and he say he's doing abolition Department of Education. What do you think about this, to close this?
Well, you know, prior to 1979, we did not have a Department of Education. And in fact, we had better education prior to 79 than we did. So when you centralize anything, you're not going to get the best out of it. It's just that simple. So the centralization of education has been a bad experiment, and it should be abolished. And the fact that they have provided all this money to colleges has made the colleges far worse than they were. When I went to college, you might walk into a classroom and the dean is teaching you, okay, or the most senior teacher is teaching you. We had a guy, a professor on literature. He was the most senior person. He was well known in Philadelphia. His name was Dan Rodden. The theater's named after him. He was our teacher. And he would walk into the room and saying, it was all male at the time, "Gentlemen, it's our job to order the disordered." And we weren't really quite sure what he was saying, but we figured it out over time. What a privilege to have that. To now you couldn't get the dean. You couldn't walk into a class. Oh, one more thing. Bill Peterson, who was my mentor, went to NYU night school to get a PhD. He goes into class. His teacher is Mises. He never heard of Mises. That's his teacher. So he forms a lifelong relationship with Mises, eventually becomes a colleague and a great Austrian economist, because he had the privilege of having the best teacher on the planet on economics at that time. All that's been lost since we had a federal Department of Education, because they've dumped so much money that the best teachers don't even teach. It makes no sense at all. Every senior engineer at CaptiveAire and person is a teacher. Everyone. Everyone does presentations continuously. That makes sense, right? So what are we going to do? Lock ourselves in the closet and say, well, we delegated that down to some new person? No.
You think he will do it this time? Trump will do it this time?
It's going to be very hard.
Who is challenging it? Who are challenged?
Every bureaucrat, every person that gets a check coming out of there. Parents seem to think, well, we need the flow of money. They don't understand the flow of money is actually the problem. It's not the solution. So somebody has to lead and say, the flow of money is the problem. We're going to cut off that flow, and you're going to be better off. But that has to be articulated to parents. Every dollar coming out of the government has a constituent. And those constituents will fight to the death to keep those dollars coming their way. They also have embedded many, many laws and unions and strictures that make it hard to have change. Only the boldest leaders can make those kind of changes. So it's not clear whether Trump can get it done, but I hope he does.
Getting closer to the end, since we mentioned Trump, and how important and at what age is talking politics to kids?
Oh, I think at a very young age. My 8th grade grandson and I, we talk politics all the time, and he's very well informed. He listens to podcasts. He'll listen to this podcast, and he'll remember what he hears, and he'll want to debate it. He actually is in our debate program.
Yeah, kids like the debate. Yeah, they are enjoying this.
You know, debate, you're going to have a lot of failures, but that's part of the process. And it's better to have those failures in the 8th to 16th grade or the 6th to 16th grade than it is to have them out once you're in professional life.
But how do you incorporate this view that at very young age into your school curriculum? Do you let teachers?
We try to avoid politics completely in school. However, that doesn't mean we don't take positions. For example, you have the woke or trans movement. We're basically saying we don't have any trans in our school. There is no such a thing, and therefore we don't have it in our school. It's working like a charm. We don't have the problems that other schools have. Because they're saying we don't recognize it, it's not reality, and it's not in this school. Very strong statement.
No gender neutral.
No gender neutral, no trigger warnings, none of that nonsense.
No,
you know
pronouns.
We're actually providing freedom. Because if everything you say is a trigger warning, they've taken away your freedom. They've taken away your ability to speak. Common sense. That's all it is. We don't put up with nonsense. And we don't care how trendy it is or whether 90% of the people believe it. If you asked Adrian Bijan, he's got a number of statements, and he said, science is not consensus. Okay, science is not emotion. It's science, and all current science needs to be challenged. Okay, that's all. Real simple. So when they say that 97% of the scientists believe in global warming, Adrian would say, and so what? That's not science. That's consensus.
Believe, not believe, it's not science.
It's consensus.
He doesn't believe in global warming.
Right.
We know the climate's change, but whether that's man-made, God is not going to allow man to destroy the world, okay? I know that much. And the things we do may have an impact, but God put us in charge of the world, and He knows we're compatible with the animals and the trees and the environment. And we may make some mistakes, but we'll correct them over time. But creating climate change as another God, another religion, is very evil. And that's all it is. It's a religion. That's what it is.
I had the same question with Walter Block, and I want to give you the same question. Why do you think you say you believe Austrian economic school and libertarians? Why do you think these libertarians are not so successful? So many countries in the world. So what is the problem there?
Because libertarians require you to live in reality. And all that, it's pretty simple. Whereas if you say, well, the government can spend any amount of money it wants, modern monetary theory, and it doesn't matter, everybody says, hooray, let's have a party. Let's live high. That's not reality. So we basically have a false economy because we're dumping $2 trillion a year in borrowed money from somewhere around the world. Yeah. The current rate based on Q1 of this 25 fiscal year is pushing toward $3 trillion. So it gets worse over time until it blows up. I will guarantee you, if we have a financial crisis, everybody in the country is going to say, I can't understand why this happened. Okay. And didn't somebody know this might happen? They're going to have all these questions, but they're very happy to participate in it until it blows up, and then they're going to blame someone else. And I might close with this. One of the things that I try to stress, if you take 100% responsibility for everything that happens, you're in control of your life. So if I delegate to somebody and they fail, what I have to say is, oh, they failed because I'm a bad delegator. That's why they failed. I can fix that. If I say they failed because people aren't any good anymore, I can't fix it. So this idea of taking 100% responsibility and living in reality is the easiest way to live in the long term. Just like being a good moral person, in the long term is easy. In the short term, it can be challenging.
But don't you think a problem could be this common sense idea? Those current libertarians, they cannot sell this idea to people. So smart people like you, Walter Block, have you ever thought getting into politics to sell this idea of real life?
Well, my mentor, Bill Peterson, said, I don't want you in politics because you can do more good outside of politics. And I think we see evidence of that. My friend Adrian Bijan was just given the National Mechanical Engineers Medal. They give one medal a year. He received that medal. He's got a tremendous influence on students around the world in the way they think. That's way more valuable than if he went into politics and got slapped around every day. And so we have to teach these ideas at the ground level, not at the political level. Because politics reflects the culture. It reflects where the people are at. So if we can instruct them, and currently we can't instruct them because the government controlled 90% of all the students, and the other 10 were shouted down. If we had all private schools, think about if you had 100,000 private schools and you had 100,000 leaders, they're all going to think a little differently. And the ones who aren't good thinkers will end up being washed out. The schools will close. The best will eventually win out. So if you think over, just think from Roman times to today. Yeah, we still have a rough culture in some ways. It's not as rough as the Roman culture. So over time, humanity does get better, but we don't recognize it at any given point in time. So, some nations are the same as they were in 2000 or in the year zero. I won't mention them, you know who they are. But think about the prosperity and human development of America. It's astounding. It's beyond anything that you could have visualized even 100 years ago. Because you have individuals operating under freedom, using their God-given talents to make things better. So over the real long term, the world will continue to get better, you know, save a nuclear war or something of that nature. But it only gets better if individuals assert themselves and do what they can do. And most individuals aren't doing that. They're going to the country club, they're going to the ball game, they're planning their next vacation. Every single person should be in service to humanity. Not so much their country, but they are in service to their country, but they're in service to humanity based on their skills. Think about the doctor you need to do some important surgery that says, well, I'm retiring because I just want to get out on the yacht. It's a tremendous loss, okay? So we have these talents we have to encourage, and we want to encourage our students. Be a servant leader for life. Viktor Frankl lived almost 50 years after the internment in the camps. 50 years. The contributions he made to the world are just unbelievably important. He set the example for us. He didn't sit on the couch and say, I was in the camps 3 years and I deserve a life of luxury. He lived the life the way it should be lived.
Have you ever thought of international Thales Academy franchise or any such?
One thing that we started, we were a little short on staff, but what we would like to do is support individuals like you in every way that we can to replicate Thales. Obviously, we can't be in every country in the world. We can barely be in a few states, but we will help you in every way possible to bring Thales and Thales ideas to Georgia. And it's a real pleasure being with you, gentlemen, and I commend you for what you're doing. You're missionaries. You're missionaries in your own country.
Oh,
it's a beautiful
trying.
thing, really. It's what makes life worthwhile.
Thank you. And thanks for your time, and it was great talk. It's a lot. It means a lot for Georgians because you understand you talking people who came from Soviet countries, Soviet era. So it's every sentence it really works. So because it's a real life, as you say.
In my last meeting with Adrian Rijan, so we go to lunch 4 times a year. I really just spent the whole time trying to understand him better, what his life was like growing up, what they did to his parents, what they did to his grandparents, what kind of impact they had on. So for anyone who does not have God-given freedom, they have my greatest empathy. In 2017, I was the keynote speaker for the Coolidge Dinner in New York City. And you don't start speaking until 8:40 at night, and everybody's had 2 drinks, so it's hard to get their attention. So my opening line was, God granted us freedom, but dictators and scoundrels for thousands of years now have restricted or taken away that freedom to most individuals. And thankfully to Coolidge and other individuals like him, we're allowed to exercise the maximum amount of freedom in our country. And what it's produced is beyond anything that our founders could have ever imagined. So anybody that doesn't have their freedom has my highest empathy, beginning with Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong. I pray for him every day. Because he's saying, I'm willing to go to jail to help my people. That's about the highest price you can pay besides your life in this world. It's maybe in some ways a higher price. Every day he's in jail because he wants Hong Kongers to be free. What a beautiful man.
What do you think about tariffs? Trump wants to raise tariffs with international tariffs.
As an Austrian, I would say we only believe in one thing, unilateral free trade. And if you look at the U.S., you have 50 states, unilateral free trade. It works perfectly. If you had unilateral free trade in the world, if Mexico chooses not to buy from us, they're the losers. We're going to buy their stuff, and we're going to make more highly productive things. So unilateral free trade is the only answer. And now you're seeing the weak knees come out. Economists who know free trade is the right answer, they're equivocating because of the current time. We should not equivocate. State what we believe. And I believe in unilateral free trade, and there's no exceptions.
Great answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
You're great men, you really are. You're what makes the world go round.